You're listening to Coupled With, the podcast that helps you take the guesswork out of feeling seen, heard, and valued in your relationship. If you've ever felt stuck in the same arguments, struggled to stay connected, or wondered how to better communicate with your partner, you're in the right place. I'm Dr. Rachel Orlick, a couples therapist and coach, and together, we're going to make relationships make sense. Let's dive in. It's been 2 days. No eye contact, no text back. You share a bed, but it might as well be opposite ends of the earth. You try to act normal, make dinner, fold the laundry, but inside, you're spiraling. What did I do? Is he still mad? Is it over? You're apologizing before you even know what it's for. And it doesn't break the silence. It just echoes louder and louder in your chest. If you've been on the receiving end of the silent treatment, you know it's not just uncomfortable. It's excruciating. It feels like punishment dressed up as self-control, like someone yanked the emotional oxygen out of the room and locked the door behind them. You start to doubt your own memory. Did you imagine that tone? Were you too much or not enough? Your nervous system doesn't need a slap in the face to panic. Silence will do the job just fine. And here's the hard part. A lot of people who use silence as a strategy don't actually think that they're doing anything wrong. I just needed space, or I didn't want to say something I'd regret. And maybe that's true. Maybe they weren't trying to harm you, but impact and intent aren't the same thing. And when one person's pause becomes another person's panic, we have to talk about that. Because when silence is used to avoid, punish, or control, it's not just space. It's a shutdown with sharp edges. Today, we're going to talk about the kind of silence that wounds. The kind that masquerades as maturity, but actually lands like emotional abandonment. We're unpacking why it's so hard, how your nervous system reads it as danger, and what makes it different from a healthy break to regulate. This isn't about shaming anyone. It's really just about naming the cost of disconnection, especially when it's weaponized as a tool for power, control, or unconscious protection. Silence might be quiet, but it's never neutral. One of my clients once said, I'd rather be yelled at than ignored. And she meant it. At least yelling means someone's still engaging. They're still trying, but when her partner shut down during conflict, no words, no eye contact, just walls, her nervous system collapsed. She'd find herself begging for conversation, apologizing for things she didn't even do, or just walking on eggshells to earn back emotional contact again. And it never worked. Another client had the opposite role. He'd go quiet during conflict thinking he was being mature. I didn't want to escalate things. I thought I was giving her space. But his silence didn't feel like safety to his partner. It felt like being iced out. What he thought was calm really landed as punishment. And her response? Protest behavior. Crying, blaming, chasing. Desperate to reestablish the connection his silence erased. This is the pattern I see all of the time. One partner shuts down, not to harm, but to protect themselves. The other escalates, not to manipulate, but to reconnect. And around we go in that cycle. The more one retreats, the more the other panics. The more one panics, the more the other retreats. Neither of them is wrong, but both of them are reacting from nervous system instincts, not present-day choices. And it creates a feedback loop that can feel impossible to exit. If this is your dynamic, you're absolutely not alone. And you're not crazy either. Whether you're the one who goes silent or the one who scrambles to fix it, it all makes sense. These are protective strategies, wired long before this relationship ever started. But just because it's familiar, it doesn't mean it's actually working. And if it's happening often, that's a sign that the nervous system and not the relationship actually needs repair first. Let's clear something up right now. Needing space is not the problem. Avoiding escalation isn't the problem. But silence that feels like punishment, that's a problem. And a lot of people don't realize they're using it that way. They think they're de-escalating, staying calm, or being mature. That one's my favorite. And what they're actually doing is disconnecting without consent of their partner. And disconnection without consent, especially after a conflict, lands as rejection, abandonment, or control. Sometimes all three. And sometimes it's devastating. The tricky thing is, we don't label it that way in the moment. We call it cooling off or giving space. So just to be clear, this isn't about villainizing anybody. Most people who use silence as a tool aren't actually trying to be cruel. They're trying to avoid saying something harmful, or they're overwhelmed and don't know how to regulate themselves. But when silence becomes habitual, when it shows up every time things get hard, it's no longer space, it's avoidance. And if you're the partner on the other side, your nervous system doesn't interpret this as peace. It hears, "You don't matter enough to me to respond." That's the reframe. The issue isn't quiet, it's the absence of signal, the absence of warmth, presence, and clarity. Silence used the wrong way is still a shutdown. And shutdowns are just as destabilizing as explosions. They just leave a quieter bruise, and actually sometimes a deeper one. So if you've been thinking, but I didn't do anything, that's actually the point. That nothingness, that lack of response, that's the rupture. Connection takes energy. Silence is withdrawal. It might feel like safety to you, but to someone else, it can feel like punishment, especially when it comes without warning and without return. The absence is the impact, even if you didn't mean it. So let's talk about what your nervous system actually does with silence. Because here's the deal. Your body isn't just reacting to what's logical. It's scanning for cues of safety or threat, and it's doing that constantly. This is what polyvagal theory calls neuroception. And when someone you love suddenly goes quiet, especially after conflict, your system doesn't interpret that as neutral. It reads it as danger. Not maybe, not eventually, immediately. Silence triggers a threat response in attachment-wired systems. Because when we're little, connection is survival. If the people we rely on disappear, even emotionally, it's terrifying. Our tiny baby nervous systems wire themselves to protest or collapse depending on how we were met or not met. So when your partner goes silent, your body doesn't hear, "Oh, they need space." It hears, "They're gone, I'm not safe, I need to do something fast." That's not dramatic. That's biology. It's your internal alarm system doing exactly what it was wired to do, its job. But here's where it gets messy. The person who goes quiet feels like they're finally calming down. Heart rate drops, voice is steady because they're not using it, and they assume that must mean they're regulated. But often it's not regulation. It's collapse. The nervous system has gone into a freeze mode. It feels quiet on the outside, but it's actually a form of disconnection, and the partner on the receiving end feels that absence immediately. It's like your nervous system is a radio scanning for signal. Eye contact, voice tone, facial expressions. Those are all cues of connection. When they disappear, the station goes silent and the body reacts. Anxiety, shutdown, fawning, blame, panic. Not because you're needy, but because your system can't find a signal. It doesn't care that it's just a pause. It cares that something essential went missing. Silence hurts because the connection broke, and no one said when or if it's coming back. This is why silence can feel like abandonment, even when that's not the intention. Your nervous system doesn't wait for clarification. Nervous systems react to absence, and when those cues of safety are gone, even temporarily, our body goes into protect mode. It's not a character flaw. This is how attachment works. The goal isn't to never need space. The goal is to stay connected even when apart. Let's be real. Sometimes you do need space. Sometimes the pause is the only thing standing between you and a blow-up. But here's the thing. A regulated pause feels completely different from a silent shutdown. One brings clarity while the other is confusion. One says, I need a minute and I'll be back. The other says, well, nothing at all, and expects the other person not to panic, even though all their connection signals just disappeared like a power outage. It's not about how long you're quiet. It's about what the quiet says. Regulated space feels like, okay, I'm stepping away so I can come back later better. Dysregulated silence feels like, I'm gone. Figure it out on your own. One leaves the light on, the other slams the door and throws away the key somewhere. And to someone with attachment wounds, that difference really matters, because the absence of signal doesn't just feel like distance. It feels like rejection and punishment and emotional purgatory. When we don't name that difference, we confuse not reacting with being healthy. But numbing out isn't actually regulation. A real pause leaves space and maintains connection. You don't really have to say much, but even a simple, I need 10 minutes, I'll check in after that, really changes a lot. It lets your partner's nervous system know that they haven't been abandoned. I'm not saying that you owe your partner a speech every time you're overwhelmed, but relationships thrive on signal. Silence without signal is where people start filling in the blanks, and they usually fill them with shame. I must have messed up. They're disgusted with me. I always ruin things. And that story really starts to spiral fast. And the more it spirals, the harder it gets to repair. Not because the rupture itself was huge, but actually because it was invisible. So if you've been using quiet as your go-to, let's ask yourself, is this calming me or disconnecting me? Is it helping us or just avoiding them? You're allowed to take space. But when that space becomes a wall instead of a boundary, then nobody wins. Especially not the part of you that actually wants closeness, but doesn't know how to reach for it without freezing first. If you're the one who tends to go quiet, here's one shift to start with. Say something before you say nothing. That's it. Just one sentence. It doesn't need to be poetic or perfect. Just let the other person know what's happening. I feel overwhelmed and I don't want to shut down. I need 10 minutes and then I'll check back in. That sentence keeps the thread intact. It tells their nervous system, you haven't been abandoned. I'm still here. If that feels hard, good. That means it matters. Silence is easy. Signal takes vulnerability. But it's that little bridge of communication that rewires the whole dynamic. When your partner knows what to expect, they're less likely to panic or protest. They're not trying to decode your silence. They're not scrambling to fix the rupture before it even gets worse. One cue, just one, can turn a shutdown into a pause. And a pause, when done with clarity, becomes a powerful action of connection. If you're on the receiving end of silence, your move is different, but it's equally powerful. Instead of spinning in, "What did I do wrong?" try this inner script. "This feels like disconnection, but I don't have to make up a story." Then take a moment to regulate yourself. Breathe, move your body, name that part that's freaking out. You can't force your partner to re-engage, but you can anchor yourself while you wait for repair. In relationships, clarity is co-regulation. And co-regulation doesn't always mean a hug or a heart-to-heart. Sometimes it's just that quick, "Hey, I'm stepping away, but I'll be back." Sometimes it's choosing not to spiral, even when your inner chaos possum is doing backflips in your chest. The magic isn't in perfection. It's in one interrupted pattern, one sentence, one breath, one moment where you do it differently on purpose. These moves sound small, but they're radical. They interrupt shame spirals and protest cycles. They create enough safety to stay in the relationship instead of running from it. If you want connection that lasts under stress, this is where you have to start. Not with a script, not with a therapist in the room, just two nervous systems learning how to stay in the same room without disappearing from each other. If this episode hit a nerve, I want you to know it makes sense. Whether you're the one who goes quiet or the one who's scrambling to reconnect, you're not wrong for how you respond. You're running protection strategies, probably ones you actually never chose. You just inherited them. Silence might have been the only safe option once. Desperate protest might have been the only way to get seen. But if those strategies are causing more disconnection than connection now, it's okay to outgrow them. And it's possible to do it gently. We don't shift these patterns overnight, but we can start to name them. And when we name something, we start to work with it. That's the invitation here. You don't have to go from shutdown to eloquent repair in one leap. You just have to practice leaving a light on, even a tiny nightlight, so the people you love know that you're still in the room, even if you need to pause. Connection doesn't mean no conflict. It means learning how to stay reachable even when things are hard. This is the exact thing that I work with clients on. This is that nuance, how to take space without creating a rupture, how to move through protest without abandoning yourself, how to shift from reactive to regulated even when your whole body wants to disappear. The repair starts with one move and one honest sentence at a time. I'm so glad you're here and that you listened. And I hope more than anything that you feel a little more seen than you did 20 minutes ago. Go gently with yourself this week, especially if silence has been your survival script. You're allowed to write a new one. Keep practicing. Keep choosing signal over shutdown, and I'll meet you right back here next week with the light on. If you've been nodding along during this episode thinking, "This is exactly what happens in my relationship, but I don't know how to stop it," I made something for you. It's a free 7-day email course called Break the Cycle. Each day I'll walk you through simple steps to stop the same fight from repeating and start rebuilding real connection without shutting down, walking on eggshells, or trying to do it all perfectly. You can sign up at my website. I'll link it in the show notes. It's totally free. This isn't just about communication. It's about breaking patterns that are breaking you. That's it for today's episode of Coupled With. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe so you never miss what's next. And if you found it helpful, please share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review. It really helps more than you know. And if you're curious about how we might work together or want more resources to strengthen your relationship, head over to my website, www.drrachelorlick.com. You'll find free tools, podcast extras, and ways to go deeper. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.